In the luxurious office on the 32nd floor of a New York skyscraper, record label boss Don Arden told Ozzy, "Your solo career is a stillborn project," never knowing he was sitting across from one of music history's greatest phenomena. 5 years after that meeting, the same boss would be on his knees apologizing to Ozzy because 100 million album sales were enough to destroy all prejudices. Sometimes the biggest successes are born from the most ruthless rejections. The autumn of 1979 found Ozzy Osbourne at the lowest point of his professional life. Black Sabbath, the band he had helped create and lead to international stardom, had unceremoniously dismissed him just months earlier. The official reason given was his increasingly erratic behavior and struggles with alcohol and drug addiction. But Ozzy knew the truth was more complex. Creative differences, personality conflicts, and the pressures of maintaining success had gradually torn apart the brotherhood that had once seemed unbreakable. Sitting in his modest Birmingham flat, surrounded by newspaper clippings that chronicled his fall from grace, Ozzy contemplated a future that seemed increasingly bleak. The music press had already begun writing his obituary, with headlines like "The End of Ozzy" and "From Prince of Darkness to Has-Been" dominating the rock magazines. Many industry insiders considered his career effectively over, viewing him as just another cautionary tale about the dangers of excess in rock and roll. But Sharon Arden, daughter of legendary music manager Don Arden, saw something different when she looked at Ozzy. Where others saw a washed-up former rock star struggling with personal demons, she saw raw talent that had been mismanaged and underutilized. Sharon had grown up in the music business, watching her father build and destroy careers with equal efficiency. She understood both the creative and commercial aspects of the industry in ways that few people could. "You're going to do a solo album," Sharon told Ozzy one gray November afternoon as rain streaked the windows of his flat, "and it's going to be the best thing you've ever done." Ozzy looked at her with a mixture of hope and skepticism. "Sharon, I appreciate what you're trying to do, but who's going to give me a record deal? Black Sabbath was my meal ticket, and now that's gone. Leave that to me," Sharon replied, with the confidence that would later make her one of the most formidable managers in rock music. "I know exactly who we need to talk to." Don Arden's reputation in the music industry was legendary, and not always for positive reasons. Known as the Al Capone of pop, he had built his empire through a combination of shrewd business sense, intimidation tactics, and an absolutely ruthless approach to contract negotiations. His client roster included some of the biggest names in rock music, and his Mayfair office served as the unofficial headquarters for British rock management. The office itself was designed to intimidate. Located in one of London's most expensive districts, it occupied the entire top floor of a Victorian building that had been completely renovated to reflect Don's taste for luxury and power. The walls were lined with gold and platinum records from his various successful acts, and the massive mahogany desk dominated a room that seemed calculated to make visitors feel small and insignificant. Don Arden was in his early 50s, a compact man whose immaculate appearance and soft-spoken manner masked a personality that could turn volcanic without warning. He had started his career in the 1960s, managing small acts, but his breakthrough came when he began representing major international stars. His success had made him wealthy beyond most people's dreams, but it had also made him incredibly selective about the projects he chose to support. When Sharon first approached her father about managing Ozzy's solo career, his reaction was predictably dismissive. "The man is finished," Don said flatly, not even looking up from the contracts he was reviewing. "Black Sabbath was his one shot at success, and he blew it. Why would I waste my time on a has-been?" "Because," Sharon replied, matching her father's businesslike tone, "you've always been able to see potential where others see problems. And because Ozzy's not finished, he's just getting started." Don finally looked up, studying his daughter with the calculating gaze that had made him so successful in negotiations. Sharon had been around the music business her entire life, and he had gradually come to respect her instincts about talent and marketability. But this seemed like a stretch, even for someone with her optimistic nature. "Have you heard what the industry is saying about him?" Don asked. "The man can barely get through a conversation without slurring his words. He's a liability, not an asset." But Sharon was persistent, and she had inherited her father's determination along with his business acumen. Over the course of several weeks, she gradually wore down his resistance, presenting detailed arguments about Ozzy's untapped potential and the commercial possibilities of his solo career. The meeting was scheduled for a Tuesday morning in late November 19 Don Arden had finally agreed to meet with Ozzy, but he made it clear that this was primarily a favor to his daughter, rather than a serious business consideration. The appointment was set for 10 a.m. in Don's Mayfair office, and both Sharon and Ozzy understood that this might be their only opportunity to change his mind. Ozzy spent the night before the meeting in a state of nervous anxiety that was unusual even for someone who regularly performed in front of thousands of people. This was different from stage fright. This was about his entire future, about whether he would have the chance to prove that his career was far from over. Sharon had briefed him extensively about her father's personality and business style. "He's going to try to intimidate you," she warned. "That's just how he operates. Don't let it get to you. Just be yourself, but be the best version of yourself." They arrived at the office building 20 minutes early, using the extra time to compose themselves and review their strategy one final time. Sharon had prepared a detailed presentation about Ozzy's potential market appeal, including demographic studies and financial projections that demonstrated the commercial viability of his solo career. The building's elevator carried them silently to the top floor, where Don's secretary, a efficient woman named Margaret, who had worked for him for over a decade, ushered them into the waiting area. The walls were covered with photographs of Don with various celebrities and industry figures, creating an impressive display of his connections and influence. At exactly 10 a.m., the massive office doors opened, and Don Arden emerged to greet them personally. This was itself significant. Don rarely met clients in the waiting area, preferring to have them escorted into his office, where the environment was completely under his control. "Mr. Osbourne," Don said, extending his hand with the practiced charm that he used for all initial meetings. "I've heard a great deal about you." Ozzy shook his hand firmly, making eye contact and projecting as much confidence as he could muster. "Thank you for agreeing to see me, Mr. Arden. I know your time is valuable." Don gestured toward his office. "Please come in. Let's discuss what brings you here." Don Arden's office was even more impressive than the waiting area. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered panoramic views of London, while the room itself was furnished with antiques and artwork that spoke of both wealth and refined taste. The massive desk was positioned so that visitors would be forced to look up at Don, who used every psychological advantage available to him. As they settled into the leather chairs arranged in front of the desk, Don opened a thick file that contained what appeared to be extensive research on Ozzy's career and recent troubles. This preparation was typical of Don's approach. He never entered a negotiation without knowing everything possible about the other party. So Don began, his tone conversational, but with an underlying edge. "You want to pursue a solo career. That's an ambitious goal for someone in your current situation. I believe I have a lot more to offer than what people have seen so far," Ozzy replied, trying to strike a balance between confidence and humility. Don leaned back in his chair, studying Ozzy with the calculating gaze that had made him so successful in the music business. "Let me be direct with you, Mr. Osbourne. I've been in this industry for over 20 years, and I've seen countless talented people destroy their careers through poor decisions and self-destructive behavior." He opened the file and began reading from what appeared to be a collection of press clippings and industry reports. Multiple arrests for public intoxication, erratic behavior during performances, conflicts with bandmates that resulted in your dismissal from Black Sabbath, property damage at hotels across 3 continents. Each item was delivered in Don's matter-of-fact tone, creating a damning litany of professional failures and personal problems. Ozzy felt his confidence ebbing as the list continued, but he forced himself to remain focused on the opportunity that this meeting represented. "And now," Don continued, "you want me to invest my time, money, and reputation in launching your solo career. Can you help me understand why I should take that risk?" Sharon leaned forward, ready to intervene with her prepared presentation, but Ozzy held up his hand slightly, indicating that he wanted to respond personally. This was the moment that would determine everything, his ability to articulate his vision and convince Don that he was worth the investment. "Mr. Arden," Ozzy began, his voice gaining strength as he spoke, "everything you've said about my past is true. I've made mistakes, and I've paid the price for them. But those experiences are also what make my music real." He paused, collecting his thoughts. "When I write songs, I'm not creating fantasies. I'm drawing from genuine experiences with darkness, addiction, and redemption. There are millions of people who connect with that honesty because they've been through similar struggles." Don listened without interruption, his expression revealing nothing about his reaction to Ozzy's words. "I know I'm a risk," Ozzy continued, "but I'm also someone who survived things that would have destroyed other people. That survival instinct, that ability to find hope in the darkest places, that's what my solo career will be about. When Ozzy finished speaking, the office fell silent, except for the distant sound of London traffic far below. Don continued to study him, weighing everything he had heard against his extensive experience in evaluating talent and market potential. Finally, Don spoke, and his words would haunt both him and Ozzy for years to come. "Mr. Osbourne," he said, his tone carrying the finality of a judge delivering a verdict. "I appreciate your honesty about your situation, but honesty doesn't sell records. Talent alone doesn't guarantee success, and reliability is absolutely essential in this business." He closed the file and leaned forward, his voice taking on the dismissive tone that had crushed countless dreams over the years. "Your solo career is a stillborn project. You'll never sell even 1,000 albums, let alone enough to justify the investment it would require to launch and promote your career properly." The words hit Ozzy like physical blows. Here was one of the most powerful men in the music industry, someone whose opinion could make or break careers, delivering what amounted to a professional death sentence. Furthermore, Don continued, seemingly oblivious to the devastation his words were causing, "The market for heavy metal is declining. The audience is moving toward more sophisticated sounds, more polished presentations. There's simply no place in the current industry for someone with your particular approach to music." Sharon watched her father with a mixture of disappointment and anger. She had hoped that his business instincts would overcome his prejudices, but it was clear that he had already made up his mind before the meeting began. "I'm sorry," Don concluded, rising from his chair to signal that the meeting was over, "but I can't in good conscience recommend that you pursue this path. My advice would be to find another line of work, something more suited to your current circumstances." The elevator ride down from Don Arden's office felt like a descent into hell for Ozzy. The silence between him and Sharon was heavy with disappointment and uncertainty about what would happen next. Everything they had hoped for had been demolished in less than an hour, and the future that had seemed possible just that morning now appeared completely out of reach. As they walked through the London streets, past the expensive shops and restaurants of Mayfair, Ozzy felt the weight of yet another professional rejection. This wasn't just about one man's opinion. Don Arden's position in the industry meant that his assessment would likely be shared by other major players. Word would spread that even Sharon's own father considered Ozzy a bad investment. "I'm sorry," Sharon said finally, breaking the silence that had stretched between them since leaving the building. "I really thought he would see your potential." Ozzy stopped walking and turned to face her. "You believed in me when nobody else would. That means more than you know. But maybe your father is right. Maybe I am finished." "No," Sharon replied with a vehemence that surprised them both. "He's wrong. He's completely wrong, and I'm going to prove it." That afternoon, sitting in a small cafe near Sharon's flat, they began planning an alternative strategy. If the established industry wouldn't give Ozzy a chance, they would create their own opportunities. Sharon had connections throughout the music business, built through years of working alongside her father, and she was prepared to use every one of them. "We don't need him," Sharon said, her determination growing stronger as they talked. "We'll find another way. There are other managers, other labels, other people who might be willing to take a chance." But even as she spoke with confidence, both of them understood the magnitude of the challenge they faced. Don Arden's rejection would become known throughout the industry within days, making it even more difficult to find support elsewhere. They were essentially starting from zero, with no backing and no guarantees. The months following the rejection were among the most difficult of Ozzy's life. Word of Don Arden's assessment had indeed spread throughout the industry, creating a situation where most major labels and management companies wanted nothing to do with him. Sharon found herself making dozens of phone calls, attending countless meetings, and facing rejection after rejection. But she refused to give up, and her persistence gradually began to pay off. Through a series of connections and referrals, she was able to arrange meetings with smaller, more independent operators who were willing to consider projects that the major players had dismissed. The breakthrough came through an unexpected source. Randy Rhoads, a young guitarist from Los Angeles, who had been recommended by someone in Sharon's network. Randy was classically trained, but had a passion for heavy metal that aligned perfectly with Ozzy's vision for his solo career. When Ozzy first heard Randy play, something clicked that had been missing since his departure from Black Sabbath. Here was a musician who understood both the technical aspects of the music and the emotional intensity that Ozzy wanted to convey. Their collaboration began to produce songs that were more sophisticated and emotionally complex complex than anything Ozzy had previously recorded. Sharon used these early collaborations to create demo recordings that she could present to potential backers. The music spoke for itself in ways that meetings and presentations never could, demonstrating Ozzy's artistic growth and commercial potential. Gradually, they assembled a team of people who believed in the project. A small independent label agreed to provide initial funding. Session musicians were recruited for recording and touring. A booking agent began arranging performance opportunities. The recording of Blizzard of Oz took place in a small studio in Los Angeles, far from the major music industry centers where Ozzy had been repeatedly rejected. The process was intense but liberating, allowing him to explore musical directions that would have been impossible within the constraints of Black Sabbath's established sound. Songs like Crazy Train and Mr. Crowley showcased a level of musical sophistication and emotional depth that surprised even Ozzy's supporters. The collaboration with Randy Rhoads had pushed both musicians to new creative heights, resulting in music that was simultaneously heavier and more melodic than anyone had expected. When the album was completed, even the small label that had agreed to release it was surprised by the quality of the material. This wasn't the desperate attempt at relevance that many people had expected from a former Black Sabbath member. This was innovative, powerful music that stood on its own merits. The album's release strategy was modest by industry standards. There was no massive marketing campaign, no huge promotional budget. Instead, Sharon relied on grassroots promotion, building audience awareness through radio play, live performances, and word of mouth. But the music itself proved to be more powerful than any marketing campaign could have been. Radio stations that played tracks from the album received immediate positive listener response. Concert venues that booked Ozzy's tour found themselves selling out faster than anticipated. Within 6 months of its release, Blizzard of Oz had exceeded every sales projection and expectation. The album reached platinum status in multiple countries, spawning hit singles and establishing Ozzy as a major solo artist in his own right. Critics who had written him off were forced to acknowledge the quality and innovation of his new material. More importantly, the success proved that there was indeed a large audience for Ozzy's particular approach to heavy metal. Far from being a declining market, the genre was evolving and expanding, with Ozzy's solo work helping to define new directions and possibilities. The touring in support of the album was equally successful, with Ozzy selling out venues across North America and Europe. His live performances demonstrated that his stage presence and connection with audiences had not diminished. If anything, the solo format allowed him to showcase aspects of his personality and artistry that had been constrained within Black Sabbath. As the album's sales climbed toward multi-platinum status, word of its success reached every corner of the music industry, including Don Arden's Mayfair office. The man who had dismissed Ozzy as a stillborn project found himself reading industry reports that documented one of the most successful solo debuts in rock history. The phone call came on a Tuesday morning in early 1981, almost exactly 1 year after the disastrous meeting in Don Arden's office. Sharon answered, recognizing her father's voice immediately, despite the fact that they had barely spoken since that day. "Sharon," Don said, his usual commanding tone replaced by something that sounded almost like humility. "I need to speak with you and Mr. Osbourne." The meeting was arranged for the following week, in the same office where Ozzy had been so brutally dismissed. But the dynamics were completely different now. Ozzy arrived not as a desperate former rock star seeking support, but as the creator of one of the year's most successful albums. Don Arden, usually so confident and controlling in his own environment, seemed genuinely uncomfortable as he attempted to address the situation. The gold and platinum records on his walls, which had once seemed like symbols of his superior judgment, now served as reminders of opportunities he had missed. "I was wrong," Don said simply, the words seeming to come with great difficulty. "I completely misjudged your potential and your market appeal. I let my preconceptions cloud my business judgment." He walked around his desk, abandoning the power position he usually maintained during meetings. "I'd like to discuss representing your career going forward. I believe I could help you build on this success." Ozzy looked at Sharon, then back at Don. The satisfaction of this moment was profound, but it was tempered by his understanding of how the music business operated. Success created opportunities, but it also attracted people who had previously shown no interest. "Mr. Arden," Ozzy said carefully, "I appreciate your honesty about your mistake, but my career is in very good hands already." He gestured toward Sharon, whose management skills had been proven through the success they had achieved together. together. I have someone who believed in me when nobody else would. I think I'll stick with that arrangement." The success of Ozzy Osbourne's solo career became one of the music industry's most famous examples of how conventional wisdom can be spectacularly wrong. His subsequent albums continued to achieve both commercial success and critical acclaim, establishing him as one of the most important figures in heavy metal history. The total sales of his solo albums would eventually exceed 100 million copies worldwide, making Don Arden's prediction about never selling even 1,000 albums one of the most inaccurate assessments in music business history. But beyond the numbers, Ozzy's success represented something more significant: the triumph of artistic vision over industry prejudice. Don Arden's misjudgment became a cautionary tale within the music industry about the dangers of dismissing artists based on superficial assessments or temporary setbacks. The story was frequently cited in business schools and industry seminars as an example of how personal biases can interfere with sound commercial judgment. For Sharon, the experience of launching Ozzy's solo career established her as one of the most respected managers in rock music. Her willingness to believe in an artist when the entire industry had given up became the foundation of a career that would span decades and include numerous successful artists. But perhaps most importantly, the story demonstrated the power of persistence and belief in the face of overwhelming skepticism. Ozzy's transformation from industry reject to global superstar proved that talent, when properly supported and promoted, can overcome any obstacle. The meeting in Don Arden's office on that November morning in 1979 was intended to be the final chapter in Ozzy Osbourne's musical career. Instead, it became the beginning of one of rock music's greatest success stories. The rejection that seemed so devastating at the time ultimately forced Ozzy and Sharon to find alternative paths that led to even greater achievements. Don Arden's assessment that Ozzy would never sell even 1,000 albums became a benchmark against which the subsequent success could be measured. Every platinum certification, every sold-out arena, every award and accolade served as evidence of how wrong that initial judgment had been. The story serves as a reminder that the music industry, like any business, is operated by human beings with all their limitations and biases. Success often depends not just on talent, but on finding the right people who can recognize and nurture that talent. Most importantly, it demonstrates that setbacks and rejections, no matter how devastating they seem at the time, can become the foundation for even greater achievements. Sometimes the people who tell you that you can't succeed are simply showing you that you need to find a different path to prove them wrong. In the end, Ozzy Osbourne's 100 million album sales spoke louder than any words could have. They silenced the critics, vindicated the believers, and established a legacy that continues to inspire artists who face their own moments of industry rejection and doubt.